Hello everyone, welcome to this video that we are going to use to look at the cinematography of Frances Ha. The reason we're making this video is that we are studying the WJC Edgeworthcast Film Studies A-level course, and this is component 1, section B, US films since 2005. And the films we're looking at are La La Land and Frances Ha. So we've already looked at La La Land, and I'll do a video about that, a companion piece of this one, but I wanted to address some of the cinematography used in Frances Ha. Okay, so as we know, the whole focus of this module, or part of the focus of the module rather, is on the differences between indie and mainstream film. And if we keep that in mind, that sort of informs every module and every essay that we're going to write, or every critique we're going to pose on these two films. So I'm not going to bog this video down by going through the differences between mainstream and indie. We've covered that in the lesson, and I'll do a video on that. But it's enough to say that Frances Ha is our independent film, and we have to look at the cinematography and have a discussion about how that is different from mainstream and how the camera is used to create meaning. So I am doing this off the top of my head. So if there's and an R and or a bit of stall, and just bear with me. But this, what I'm sharing on screen now, is the question that we're going to be looking at. And it says, with close reference to the two films you studied, explore how cinematography creates meaning. And as I said, mainstream and independent cinemas have distinctly different approaches to cinematography, and your understanding of these is key to success in this question. So as I said, before we analyse our films, take some time to watch the mainstream and independent film extracts and complete the handout provided, and also look back at our lessons. You can view them on the website, which I'll post below, and in our the students in the work we've done in class, and have a look at the main differences between mainstream and indie film, and then come back to this video. Okay, so we've already done cinematography of La La Land, so I'm not going to dwell on that. What we are going to look at is Frances Ha. So what I would do in a lesson, or what I'd ask in a lesson, is to watch the extract, make some notes, and then we feed back to the boards. But I'm not going to do that. It's not really conducive to this online learning at the moment. So I'm going to do a video analysis. And again, this is off the top of my head. This is what comes to mind. I don't want to get too comprehensive with this one. I want to give you some space to add some points. And what I'm going to do is analyze the opening 2 scenes, or the opening 5 to 6 minutes of the film. And then you're going to copy my approach, and you're going to analyze a third additional scene. And then you can use those scenes to write your 20-mark analysis. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share the film. I'll play it without sounds, and I'm just going to talk over it quite generally, and then you can listen to this, you can make some notes, you can use what I say to inform your own analysis. Right, let me load up the film if I am able to do so. All right, this should hopefully be it. So hopefully you're seeing the film. Okay, so the Criterion logo, and the point about independent film, they'll generally have a lot more logos in front of or different title cards in front of the start of the film. That's because it's much harder to get backing and financial backing in the independent circle, so you have to sort of scrape it together. So you'll have companies sometimes from Asia, from Europe, and basically what happens is a filmmaker will make an idea, and they will sell distribution and exhibition rights before the film is made. So, for example, Baumbach may have said to a filmmaker or a cinema chain or a distributor in, let's say, Hong Kong, he may have said, "I'll give you the film when it's made in return for, you know, an an upfront like fee of X amount of money, and that'll help you make the film, and then you can make the profit on it later on." So that's why we have a lot of logos. Anyway, so we already established straight away that the film is black and white. Now, that may not seem like a big point, but it is quite important for a number of reasons. Number one, it establishes the film and sort of positions it as outside of mainstream, Hollywood system. Hollywood generally does not make black and white films. Most mainstream films are, technical, 4K, all that type of stuff. So straight away, we just know something is different. And there's the first point to make in your essay, is that it's shot in black and white, and it indicates that this is not mainstream, and it's more of a signifier of an indie approach to filmmaking. And what you'll have noticed already, or hopefully noticed, is the film begins not with an establishing shot. It just gets straight into the action. And this is going to be a recurring like motif, if you like, through the cinematography, because it adds realism. And one of the arguments we can make about meaning in the film is that it's presenting a more realistic version of reality, a more realistic version of women and their relationships. So the camera work mirrors that. It doesn't have establishing shots. It's not obviously constructed like a mainstream film with shot reverse shot, point of views. It's quite observational. So there's a point straight away, black and white. And number two, we do not have a establishing shot, which is a signifier through cinematography of its indie status. And it creates meaning because by definition, it's just an alternative to mainstream. So ideologically, that's making a lot of meaning. All right. So we have Francis and Sophie playing in the park. So let's play a sec. You know, just the shots are quite long in terms of shot length. You know, watch Avengers or modern mainstream films, and you realize the shots are super, super quick, really, really fast. But in this film, we have quite long shots. So that's something that we're going to talk about continually throughout this analysis, is the observational nature of the cinematography. It's quite restricted, it's held back, and we're just sort of watching these characters rather than having their perspectives forced upon us. Here you go. So we established a lot already. We established, number one, these two characters are close. I mean, quite literally, they're close, they're central in the shot. And, you know, it's all about them. So it's a close relationship. It's a female relationship, which is unusual in mainstream film. And also one of the elements that make people, or some people, you know, some of our students, some of yourselves listen, not like the film is how quirky the characters are. So look, they're quirky. We also established that Sophie and Francis, the fun-loving, you know, they are quite different. Hashtag not like other girls and all that. But they are quite different, and we established, number one, their close connection, and also that we are getting a realistic view of women, young women, millennial women in New York in the noughties, and that's reflected through the wide observational shot. You know, it's like a documentary almost at this stage, that we're watching the characters as if they're unaware. It feels very natural, and that's all going on. Right. Again, quite far back observational. Obviously, we're not talking about sound, but the sound contributes to that as well. We have the, you know, the diegetic score and the non-diegetic vocals and soundtrack mixing, but they're not mixed like they would be in a mainstream film. They sort of overlap and weave in and out. And again, just adds to the realism. So you may want to mention that just as a point, and say how this realistic approach is, you know, seen across the entire set of key and macro elements. Okay. We also learn, you know, the play fighting. So that indicates something about their relationship. It's loving but combative, which, you know, takes place throughout the film. They do love each other, but it's quite combative, and they have some problems and then get back together at the end. And usually, when we open a film, we would not have two female leads like this. And the film establishes its indie status by showing us that the narrative is going to focus on two women, something not really enabled by mainstream studio, the mainstream studio system. So again, look, you know, notice how the camera's positioned, it's sort of on a shelf. It feels less obviously constructed than what I mean by that. You know, the camera's not flying around, whipping around. We're not getting a reaction shot and a point of view to guide our response. We're allowed to sort of generate that ourselves. So again, more independent technique as opposed to mainstream. So again, it's slow, isn't it? That's a nice pan from left to right. We have Francis reading and the slow pan to Sophie who's knitting. It indicates again their close bonds. She is actually listening to it. Look at the way the legs are intertwined, and it shows a connection. Yeah, you could have had an edit there, and it would have sort of indicated two separate people. Yeah, one shot of Francis in isolation, then we cut to a shot of Sophie listening in isolation, and the connection's there, but they're not together. By keeping it as one shot, removing the edit, and doing a pan from left to right, it shows a visual connection. So visually, they're connected, and obviously that creates meaning for the audience. Again, they're always in shot together. Maybe they're doing different things, but again, the mirror's been placed there to show us Sophie's face and also have them both on screen at the same time. So it's all about re-establishing that their relationship is strong, and this is going to be the central relationship in the film. It also shows the difference between the two characters, doesn't it, as well? Again, very interesting. Again, wide shot we're watching, quite symmetrical, isn't it? And again, that shows the symmetry between the characters, their close connection. And then we have what is unusual, quite unusual. We have this shot. It's a point of view shot from Francis, and Sophie is obscured. A little hint at some of the potential problems in their relationship coming up. Also indicates that Sophie feels trapped, and maybe Francis is or is not aware of it. Well, she's not, is she? In France, Sophie does move out. But also we get a reverse shot. But it's not really a point of view shot from Sophie because we're not looking through the bars. So I would say this is like the audience's point of view. And come back to spectatorship for a second. This is a breaking from mainstream traditional approaches because we're just looking into the camera. So she's in the film talking to Sophie, but cinematically, she's talking to us, the audience, and it's about building that connection and empathizing with her. Okay, again, we have characters doing normal things, normal lives. So I'll tell you what, we'll just watch the end of the montage and then we'll get a few points about meaning. I like this shot, obviously great use of light. We don't want to get bogged down by defining low key and high key lighting in something like this, because it's not really what they're looking for. It's just listing technical stuff. It's about meaning, essentially, is what the answer's looking for. But again, we have nice chiaroscuro lighting, which is high contrast between light and dark, lots of shadows. And again, the light on Francis and Sophie's face in the darkness, they are together. Us against the world type thing. But again, it just connotes that they're very close in their relationship, and that's what the camera is used for in the opening sequences. Okay, other things we get, a few notes I've made very quickly. I'll just run through these. The camera during the montage is observational. Notice how the duo are shot at a distance as if they're being watched. This builds upon the observational nature of the camera and contributes to the, quote, real feel of the film. So the film is meant to feel more natural and less constructed than a mainstream film. Each scene or location is mostly shot in one shot, no shot reverse shots, no point of view shots, and generally to guide the audience, again, a more documentary and realistic approach to camera. The amount of focus on female characters is unusual, and the alternative mode of representation is a signifier of the film's indie status. And there's a lot of harmony and some symmetry in the shots of Francis and Sophie to show they're the same, or a better way to express that they are connected, they're on the same wavelength, and that's going to be disrupted later on. The characters are very normal. Okay, so these are not your typical female characters. The representation is actively challenging mainstream views of women, isn't it? So they're washing clothes, drinking beer, they're smoking, they're talking about, sex and sexual partners and relationships. These are things generally in the domain of male characters. So showing women like that, it's not a case of, making a woman act like a man. This is a very realistic depiction of people. And these people seem to be women, just happen to be women. So again, it's about realism and it's about breaking down and challenging that traditional representation of women. And that's reflected not only thematically through what the characters do, but in this case, through camera work. So I'll just read that out. So meaning wise, come back to meaning, this film is presenting an alternative view of women in film. The women are not subject to the male gaze in the truest sense of the words, the moldy sense of the words. Yes, the film's directed by a man, but we haven't got the lingering shots, we haven't got the male point of view shots, etc. So we sort of reject that to an extent, and that is another symbol or signifier of the film's indie status. We're not positioned, the women are not positioned as potential romantic conquests in the Big Apple, as mainstream films will position them. Instead, they are independent of men, share a platonic relationship, and are presented in a realistic way, both by their attitude, their relationship, and this is all reinforced by a camera. So the idea after 1 minute 56 is that we understand through camera work, this is not a normal representation of New York. We're not getting the establishing shots of, the Empire State Building, and we're not getting all this amazing Times Square footage. We're getting black and white shots of the real New York. So it's an alternative representation. We have an alternative representation of women. The film is going to focus on platonic relationships between women and reject the notion of, heteronormative relationships and the idea that in mainstream films, women are just defined by men and their pursuit of men. So it's all rejected, it's all thrown up there, and it's reflected by the camera. I haven't talked about everything. You can expand upon what I've said, but let's move on to the next scene. All right, so after Francis and Sophie go to bed, we cut directly, again, without an establishing shot, to a scene where Francis breaks up with a boyfriend. So again, we have a title, very limited and then a direct cut. So once again, no establishing shot, another rejection of the mainstream approach, because ultimately it doesn't matter where we are, it's irrelevant. It's not about, emotion and spectacle, it's about the characters. So what's focused on in this scene is Francis's emotional state, not where they are in relation to the other characters in the city. So temporality and your line's gone blank. Spatiality are not relevant really, or as relevant. Anyway, let's keep going. So again, an extended mid shot of the two characters, point of view of Francis. And we get a point of view of Francis because now the director's starting to align us quite closely with her. What he's trying to do effectively is make us view the world through her eyes, literally as we've just done, but view the world as she views it. So it's interesting that we get a shot of a Siamese cat. The point is, it's an ugly cat, isn't it? And it's something that will put a lot of people off. So we get a point of view shot so we can share in Francis's, surprise, disgust, or whatever emotional response is to that. She's clearly put off by it, isn't she? But then we cut back. We have the two characters in one shot. We're not getting shot reverse shots. We're not getting a usual back and forth like we would. We just get this one shot and then Francis's point of view. And again, the point of view shots in terms of camera, they're there for us to empathize with her and align with her and share their point of view that these are weird cats. So again, you can take this in slightly more basic point of view. This shot is the two shot, mid shot, both characters are together. And then when they decide to split up or the relationship is starting to come apart, they are then shot separately. Okay, so there's a point straight away. And then we can build upon that with the type of shots that are used. But again, the characters are together. The relationship is fine. But I think as well, it's quite observational once again. And I think, emotionally, the director's trying to drive an emotional response that aligns with Francis. So the longer the shot goes, the more awkward it is. And that's the shot in a minute where Francis answers the phone and she's like, "Oh, what up?" She's clearly embarrassed, isn't she? And we as an audience are meant to feel that sort of cringe or that awkwardness. But at the same time, I think it makes us like Francis more because she's being true to herself. She's not letting this guy sort of control the behavior. She still does the stupid voice, even though it is awkward. And now we start to see the characters as individuals because their relationship is coming apart. So again, this could go into edit an essay, but also, yes, it works for cinematography because Francis now feels alone. And maybe at first we had the relationship dynamic, and now we're getting to see the two individual sides, all reflected through the camera. And again, I think the film's indie status is sort of relevant here. Think about ideology and representation for a second. Narratives of mainstream films promote heteronormative relationships. The end game of most of those films, where have male-female relationships, is the unification of male and female. The boy gets the girl, etc., etc. However, in this scene, Francis rejects this, ends their relationship, and is positioned to generate an empathetic response. The meaning is that women are in control of their own lives and are not defined by the men in their lives. But coming back to the emotional response, look at this shot of Francis. I mean, she looks completely alone. She looks vulnerable. And look, we don't want to paint some inaccurate picture that this is a power thing and, he's this aggressive character and she's this vulnerable figure. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying emotionally, that shot does connote a sense of isolation. She feels very awkward, yes, but also quite vulnerable. She's just breaking up with someone and you're in someone else's home. The shot reflects that. And the fact he's walking around, dominating the space, and she's sort of left by the window in the corner. It's a wide shot, and it's a high angle looking down. So again, that evokes sense of empathy. And again, it's quite long. The shot's very long, and then we get this shot, a point of view, and this is of Francis's point of view of the boyfriend, and it's a low angle shot looking up. So again, I wouldn't say he's intimidating, but again, he's controlling the space. He's a lot bigger, and it just reinforces through the camera the awkwardness and the isolation and vulnerability Francis feels. I mean, that shot, I just want to give her a hug, don't you? It just screams discomfort. So again, very long shots. We just get to watch it. So I think the idea through the camera work, we get to experience this with Francis. We as an audience are experiencing her vulnerability and how she's feeling. And again, I'm sure the male character clearly feels this emotionally. It's sort of indicated later on. A breakup is not going to be easy for anyone, but he's standing, looking away. We think maybe there's a slightly different response, a bit more callous. Or maybe I'm just reading it that way. It's up to you. So again, if you notice, we're not like having shot, reverse shot. We're not having the camera, doing loads of different shots. It's very steady. So one shot, observational, realistic, and also driving an emotional response. If you want to take a further look, the depth of field is quite interesting. The background's out of focus on the characters. So again, it's reinforcing that visually, this is very much about the characters. The time, place, space, location is not really relevant. It's very much about a character-driven narrative, which again is symbolic or a signifier of indie. I like is that the camera's tilted up, or it seems less of it's more of a fixed eye level shot now. That tilt in the camera seems to have gone. So Frances, although she feels vulnerable, she is, a strong woman. She's standing up for herself. She has stood up and moved herself closer. So she started to now step into that space and not allow herself to be, controlled, or not allow herself to just be emotionally vulnerable. She has stood up. So to signify it again of her strength, that she has moved into the center and dominating the frame. And again, the background's out of focus, so it's very much focused on the conversation and the characters. Okay. And if you're just looking at this visually without the sound, without dialogue, without sound, just on performance and camera, it would seem that at first the boyfriend's in a position of power, or he's the person who's sort of controlling what's going on. But now looking at this, Frances seems to be a bit more in control. Yes, she's obviously upset, but the boyfriend's looking away. He's a bit more body language. So, visually, Frances is being vulnerable, but she's taking control of the situation. And again, it's a very strong, empowering message, and it promotes or reinforces one of the key ideological points of the film is an alternative representation of women. And then we're not going to talk about this scene, but it's an interesting transition, isn't it? Is that we cut from Frances in the alone in the wide shot in the boyfriend's apartment to this shot at the party, frame within a frame, surrounded by darkness, and she is this figure coming through this light. So again, isolation, vulnerability, her sense of being alone is reinforced there. But I'm going to stop there because what you need to do now in the class is to use my two scenes, and then you need to find a third scene and you need to analyze that to the same level of detail. You can pick any scene that happens after this. Don't feel compelled to do the ending, and there's no need to do that. But what you have to do is pick a scene that allows you to get a lot out of it in terms of analysis, like I've done, but also link to some of the themes I have talked about. So which scenes reinforce that idea of, heteronormative relationships and challenges that idea. It shows the relationship between women. Maybe you can pick a scene, maybe the breakdown of her relationship with Sophie, or when they get back together, so to speak, and how the camera either visually connotes the breakdown of their relationship or visually connotes the reunification of it. It's up to you. But any of the ideological, representational, or production points I have made, i.e. the independent nature of the camera work, please focus on those and pick a scene, analyze it, and then you can write up a 20-mark answer to the question on screen, which I'll just put back up. Where are we? A close reference to the two films you studied. In this case, we're looking at one film, Explore How Cinematography Creates Meaning. I have given you two scenes to look at. Your job now is to type that up, add to it, and then add a third additional scene of your own analysis to the same level, and you can submit that at the end of the lesson. Any questions, let me know, but you can view our website below.